They invited her back to the house she'd been thrown out of, 8 months pregnant and alone, just to watch her break. Evelyn Carter stood outside the iron gates of the Hawthorne Estate, her breath fogging the cold Dallas night air, one hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. Through the ornate metalwork, she could see the mansion blazing with light, every window glowing like a diamond against the October darkness. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed between vehicles. Laughter and music drifted over the perfectly manicured lawns. The invitation in her purse still felt surreal. Cream cardstock, gold embossing, elegant script that spelled out her humiliation. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Lucas Carter and Brielle Monroe at the Hawthorne Estate. Below, in Brielle's looping handwriting, it felt wrong not to invite you. After all, this place holds so many memories. Evelyn had read those words 50 times since the invitation arrived. Each reading peeled back another layer of cruelty disguised as civility. This wasn't kindness. This was theater. They wanted an audience for her shame, wanted her to witness what she'd lost, to see Lucas happy with someone better, to understand that she'd been easily replaced. What they didn't know was that tonight wasn't about humiliation. It was about timing. Inside that mansion, Lucas Carter stood tall and confident, greeting Dallas's elite as though he owned every marble tile beneath their feet. Brielle Monroe, 26 and beautiful in emerald silk, laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, her diamond engagement ring catching light with every gesture. They believed they were untouchable. They believed Lucas had built an empire. They believed the Hawthorne Estate, with its 8 bedrooms, crystal chandeliers, and gardens that stretched toward the Dallas skyline, belonged to him. They were wrong. The estate had never belonged to Lucas Carter. It belonged to Evelyn. Her grandmother, Margaret Hawthorne, had placed the property into a blind trust decades earlier. A legal fortress designed to protect family assets from opportunistic spouses and creditors. The terms were ironclad. The estate would remain hidden until Evelyn's 30th birthday or marriage dissolution, whichever came first. Lucas had never asked why there was no mortgage, never questioned prepaid property taxes, never wondered why legal documents arrived with Evelyn's maiden name buried in fine print. And Evelyn had never told him. Why would she? When they'd married 5 years ago, fresh out of college and drunk on love, she'd believed they would grow old together in that house. She'd imagined their children running through those halls, imagined holiday dinners and anniversary parties, and a lifetime of memories built on the foundation her grandmother had laid. Then came the night everything shattered. You're holding me back, Evelyn. I need someone who understands ambition, someone who fits into my world. 5 months pregnant, standing barefoot on cold marble, watching her husband walk away without looking back. That was nearly 3 years ago. Now Evelyn was 30 years old, 8 months pregnant with the daughter Lucas would never meet. And according to Texas family law, their divorce, finalized 14 months ago, had triggered the trust's final clause. At exactly 9 o'clock tonight, ownership would transfer, publicly, legally, irrevocably. Evelyn adjusted her white maternity suit, crisp, tailored, expensive, and walked toward the gates. Her heels clicked against cobblestone, her heart hammered against her ribs. Inside her belly, her daughter kicked, as though sensing her mother's resolve. They expected tears tonight. They expected shame. They expected a broken ex-wife desperate for closure. What they didn't expect was that by the time this party ended, only one person would walk away with a home, and it wouldn't be the ones throwing the celebration. The invitation had arrived on a Tuesday. Evelyn had been working from her small apartment in Oak Lawn. a modest two-bedroom that was nothing like the estate she'd once called home. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen table, surrounded by real estate listings and legal documents for her growing consulting business. She'd rebuilt her life one careful step at a time. Divorce finalized, career restarted, baby on the way. She'd been okay, not happy exactly, but okay, stable, moving forward. Then the mailman had knocked, and everything tilted sideways. The envelope was expensive, the kind of paper that whispered wealth. Inside, the invitation gleamed with gold lettering. Evelyn had stared at it for 10 full minutes, her hands trembling before reading the handwritten note beneath. It felt wrong not to invite you. After all, this place holds so many memories. Brielle's handwriting, Brielle's words, Brielle's cruelty wrapped in false sweetness. Evelyn had met Brielle Monroe exactly once, 6 months after the divorce at a charity gala in downtown Dallas. Lucas had attended with his new partner, a stunning woman, 15 years younger, who worked in marketing at one of his developments. Evelyn had been there representing a client, trying to network, trying to pretend she didn't see them across the room. Brielle had approached her near the bar. "You must be Evelyn," she'd said, her smile sharp as glass. "Lucas has told me so much about you." The emphasis on so much had been deliberate, calculated, meant to wound. "I hope you found happiness," Evelyn had replied, keeping her voice steady. "Oh, I have." Brielle's hand had drifted to Lucas's arm possessively. "Lucas is such an incredible provider. The estate is breathtaking. I can't imagine ever leaving." Evelyn had smiled politely and excused herself to the restroom, where she'd locked herself in a stall and cried until her mascara ran. Now, holding this invitation, Evelyn felt something different than grief. She felt clarity, because Brielle didn't know. Lucas didn't know. None of the people who would attend that party, Dallas's social elite, Lucas's business partners, the influencers and socialites who fed off proximity to wealth, knew the truth. The Hawthorne Estate wasn't Lucas's to offer. It was Evelyn's. And in 3 days, at exactly 9 o'clock on Saturday night, that truth would become public record. Evelyn had called her lawyer that same afternoon. "Harrison," she'd said when he answered, "they're throwing an engagement party at the estate." Harrison Mitchell had been her grandmother's attorney for 30 years before becoming Evelyn's. He was 65, sharp as a tack, and utterly unflappable. When Evelyn told him about the invitation, he'd laughed. Actually laughed. "They invited you to their engagement party at your house?" "They don't know it's mine." "No," Harrison agreed, his voice warm with satisfaction. "They don't, but they're about to." They'd discussed logistics. The trust would transfer at 9 p.m. on Saturday, Evelyn's 30th birthday, exactly 3 years after Lucas had left. Harrison would arrive at 8:45 p.m. with the documents. He'd bring 2 witnesses and a notary. Everything would be legal, public, and completely devastating. "Are you sure about this?" Harrison had asked, his tone gentler. "This will humiliate him in front of everyone he knows." Evelyn had looked down at her belly, where her daughter was growing stronger every day. "I'm sure," she'd said. Now, standing outside the gates, Evelyn pressed the call button on the intercom. A valet answered immediately. "Name, please?" "Evelyn Carter." A pause. Then, "1 moment, ma'am." She waited, breathing slowly, watching shadows move behind illuminated windows. Inside, the party was in full swing. She could hear music, something classical and expensive, could see silhouettes of people holding champagne glasses, their laughter carrying over the October breeze. The gates swung open. Evelyn walked through, her white suit pristine, her head held high. The valet looked confused, probably checking the guest list, probably wondering why an obviously pregnant woman was arriving alone. "Welcome to the Hawthorne Estate," he said, automatically. "Thank you," Evelyn replied. "I know the way." She walked up the driveway she'd once travelled every day, past the fountain her grandmother had imported from Italy, past the rose gardens that bloomed every spring, past the oak tree where she'd scattered her grandmother's ashes 5 years ago. The front door stood open, golden light spilling onto the steps. Music and voices poured out. Evelyn could see the grand foyer beyond, marble floors, crystal chandelier, the double staircase that swept upward toward bedrooms she'd once slept in. She paused at the threshold, one hand on her belly, and took a breath. Then she stepped inside. The first person to notice her was a waiter, carrying champagne. His eyes widened when he saw her pregnant belly, then travelled up to her face. Recognition flickered there. He'd probably worked events at the estate before, back when she'd lived here. "Ma'am," he started. "I'm on the guest list," Evelyn said calmly. The noise of the party washed over her. At least 60 people filled the foyer and adjoining rooms. Dallas's wealthy and powerful, dressed in designer labels, drinking expensive wine, admiring what they believed was Lucas Carter's crown jewel. And somewhere in that crowd, Lucas and Brielle were celebrating their future, a future built on a lie. Evelyn moved deeper into the party, and one by one, heads began to turn. The Hawthorne Estate had been in Evelyn's family for 3 generations. Her great-grandfather, William Hawthorne, had built the original structure in 1952, a modest ranch house on 20 acres outside Dallas. Back then, the area was rural, quiet, the kind of place where families could breathe without the city pressing in. William had made his fortune in oil and natural gas, riding the Texas boom with shrewd investments and careful planning. When he died, he'd left everything to his daughter Margaret, Evelyn's grandmother, with one instruction: protect the land, protect the family. Margaret had taken that instruction seriously. She'd expanded the house in the 1980s, transforming the ranch into an 8-bedroom mansion with grounds that sprawled over 15 acres. By then, Dallas had grown around the property, turning rural land into prime real estate. The Hawthorne Estate became legendary, featured in architectural magazines, used for charity events, whispered about at country clubs. But Margaret never sold, never subdivided, never let the estate slip through her fingers. Instead, she'd created the trust. "Money makes people stupid," she'd told Evelyn when Evelyn was 16, walking through the gardens together. "Especially marriage. You find someone you love, you think it's forever, and you forget to protect what's yours." "That sounds cynical, Grandma." Margaret had laughed, her eyes crinkling. "It's not cynical, sweetheart. It's practical. Love doesn't pay property taxes. Love doesn't stop creditors. Love doesn't prevent someone from taking everything you've built and calling it theirs." Evelyn hadn't understood then. She'd been young, romantic, certain that real love transcended money and property and legal documents. Then she'd married Lucas Carter. They'd met in college, University of Texas at Austin. Lucas had been studying business, already talking about real estate empires and development deals. Evelyn had been finishing her degree in communications, dreaming about a career in non-profit work or consulting. He'd been charming, ambitious, confident in a way that made her feel safe. "I'm going to build something incredible," he'd told her on their 3rd date, his eyes bright with vision. "Not just for me, for us, for our future." She'd believed him. They'd married right after graduation, a small ceremony at the estate, with Margaret beaming in the front row. Lucas had moved into the house like it was the most natural thing in the world. He'd never questioned it, never asked about ownership or deeds or legal structures. Evelyn had assumed he didn't care about those details, that he loved her for her, not for what she owned. She'd been wrong. For the first 2 years, everything had been perfect. Lucas started working at a real estate firm, climbing quickly, making deals. Evelyn had worked part-time at a non-profit, happy to support his career while figuring out her own path. They'd hosted dinner parties at the estate. They'd talked about children. They'd made plans. Then Lucas started changing. It was subtle at first. He began networking more aggressively, attending exclusive events, cultivating relationships with Dallas's wealthiest families. He started dressing differently, designer suits, expensive watches. He started talking about perception and image and positioning. "We need to be seen at the right places," he'd say, "with the right people." "Why?" Evelyn had asked. "We're happy." "Happy isn't enough," he'd replied. "I want to be successful. I want to be someone people respect." The estate became a tool for his ambition. He'd hosted business meetings there, impressing clients with the mansion's grandeur. He'd dropped the estate's name in conversations, letting people assume it was his. He'd invited journalists to tour the property for lifestyle pieces about Dallas's rising real estate stars. Evelyn had felt increasingly uncomfortable but said nothing. The estate was hers, yes, but they were married. What was hers was his, wasn't it? That's what marriage meant. Then she'd gotten pregnant. 5 months in, glowing with excitement, she'd told Lucas they needed to start preparing the nursery. He'd been distant lately, working long hours, traveling frequently. She'd thought a baby would bring them back together. Instead, it had ended everything. "I don't think I'm ready to be a father," he'd said, standing in the kitchen while she chopped vegetables for dinner. "You'll be great," she'd assured him, smiling. "We'll figure it out together." "No, Evelyn." His voice had been flat, cold. "I mean, I don't want to be a father, not with you." The knife had clattered to the cutting board. "What?" "You're not the partner I need," he'd continued, as though discussing a business deal. "You're sweet and you're kind, but you don't understand my world. You don't network. You don't push me forward. You're holding me back. I'm pregnant with your child." "I know." He'd looked at her belly like it was a problem to solve. "We'll work something out. Child support, custody arrangements. But I can't stay married to you. I need someone who fits into the life I'm building." She'd stood there, frozen, one hand on her stomach, unable to process what she was hearing. "Get out," she'd whispered. "Evelyn." "Get out!" she'd screamed. He'd left that night, walked out of the estate, her estate, without looking back. Filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Moved into a downtown penthouse and started dating Brielle Monroe within a month. The divorce had been brutal. Lucas had tried to claim half of everything, arguing that Texas was a community property state. His lawyers had filed motions demanding 50% of the estate's value. That's when Harrison Mitchell had unveiled the trust. "The Hawthorne Estate doesn't belong to your marital assets," Harrison had explained in court, presenting documents that proved the property had always been held separately. "It's protected by a family trust established decades before this marriage. Mr. Carter has no legal claim." Lucas's face had gone white. His lawyers had scrambled, but the law was clear. He'd received nothing from the estate in the divorce, just his own savings and half of their shared bank accounts. He'd been furious, humiliated. He'd accused Evelyn of hiding assets, of lying, of trapping him. "You let me think it was ours," he'd hissed during one court recess. "You never asked," she'd replied quietly. Now, walking through the estate's grand foyer, Evelyn saw Lucas's fingerprints everywhere. He'd redecorated, removed her grandmother's antique furniture, replaced oil paintings with modern art, installed track lighting that felt cold and commercial. He'd tried to erase her, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail. You can't erase the owner, no matter how much you redecorate. Was holding court near the fireplace, surrounded by a circle of admirers. She looked stunning. Emerald green dress that hugged every curve, diamond earrings that caught the chandelier light, makeup applied with professional precision. Her dark hair fell in glossy waves over bare shoulders. Her laugh was loud and confident, the kind that demanded attention. Oh my God! Lucas absolutely refused to consider the Malibu property, she was saying, gesturing with her champagne glass. I was like, babe, it's Malibu. And he said, Brielle, we have everything we need right here in Dallas. Isn't he just the sweetest? The women around her cooed appreciatively. Men watched with barely concealed interest. Brielle soaked it up, clearly thriving on the attention. Evelyn watched from across the room, half hidden behind a group discussing oil prices. Her hand rested on her belly, where her daughter kicked gently, as though reminding her, Mother, to stay calm. She's very beautiful, a voice said beside her. Evelyn turned. An older woman in a burgundy dress stood there, holding a glass of white wine. She had kind eyes and silver hair styled elegantly. I'm sorry, Evelyn said. Brielle Monroe. The woman nodded toward the fireplace. She's very beautiful and very loud. Despite herself, Evelyn smiled. You know her? Know of her. My husband does business with Lucas. We've met her at a few events. The woman extended her hand. Patricia Donovan. Evelyn Carter. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Carter? You're his ex-wife, Evelyn confirmed. Oh my. Patricia looked between Evelyn and Brielle, understanding dawning. That's bold of them to invite you. Isn't it? How are you handling it? Evelyn looked down at her belly, then back at Patricia. Better than they expect. Patricia studied her for a moment, then smiled slowly. I think I'm going to enjoy watching how this evening unfolds. Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion erupted near the foyer. Lucas had arrived from wherever he'd been networking, and people immediately flocked to him. He was handsome. Evelyn couldn't deny that. Tall, well-built, with the kind of confident smile that made people want to trust him. He wore a navy suit tailored perfectly, his shirt open at the collar in studied casualness. His hair was styled with just enough product to look effortless. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, laughing at jokes. This was Lucas in his element, the center of attention, the successful man everyone wanted to know. There's my beautiful fiancée, he called out when he spotted Brielle. She squealed and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. They kissed dramatically while guests applauded. Someone whistled, someone else called out congratulations. Thank you all for being here tonight, Lucas said, his arm around Brielle's waist. This estate means everything to me. Building a life, here. Creating a home with this incredible woman. He kissed Brielle's temple. It's everything I've dreamed of. Evelyn's jaw clenched. The estate is our sanctuary, Lucas continued. The place where we'll raise our family, host our friends, build our legacy. I can't imagine my life without it. Applause rippled through the crowd. Brielle beamed, her engagement ring flashing as she waved. That's when Lucas's eyes swept the room and landed on Evelyn. He froze. Color drained from his face. His arm fell away from Brielle's waist. For a moment, he just stared, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and something that looked like fear. Evelyn held his gaze steadily, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Lucas? Brielle followed his line of sight. When she saw Evelyn, her smile hardened into something uglier. "Oh, you actually came." The room fell silent. 60 pairs of eyes turned toward Evelyn. She stood there, calm and composed in her white suit, and said nothing. "How brave of you," Brielle continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Coming here must be so difficult, seeing what you lost." "Brielle," Lucas said quietly, a warning in his voice. But Brielle was on a roll, energized by the audience. "I mean, it takes real courage to face your failures head-on. I admire that. I really do." Evelyn still didn't respond. She simply looked at Brielle with an expression of mild interest, as though observing a curious specimen. The silence stretched, became uncomfortable. People shifted, not sure where to look. Finally, Evelyn smiled, small, serene, completely unruffled. "Thank you for the invitation," she said quietly. "The estate looks lovely tonight." Then she turned and walked toward the gardens, leaving Brielle sputtering behind her, and Lucas staring after her with something that looked like dread. Patricia Donovan appeared at Evelyn's elbow as she reached the French doors. "That," Patricia murmured, "was magnificent." Evelyn said nothing, but inside her heart was hammering, just a little longer now. The gardens were quieter. Evelyn stood beneath the oak tree where she'd scattered her grandmother's ashes, breathing deeply, trying to calm her racing pulse. Through the windows behind her, she could see the party continuing. Brielle had recovered quickly, already laughing with her admirers again. Lucas was talking with a group of men, but his eyes kept darting toward the gardens. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know what. Evelyn pulled out her phone and checked the time. 8:17 p.m., less than an hour now. She opened her messages and saw one from Harrison. "On my way. Documents ready. Are you sure about this?" She typed back, "I'm sure." 3 dots appeared then. "Okay. See you soon. You're braver than you know." Evelyn pocketed her phone and looked up at the oak tree. Its branches spread wide, leaves rustling in the October breeze. She remembered sitting here with her grandmother years ago, talking about life and love and legacy. "The estate isn't just property," Margaret had said. "It's a promise that our family will always have a place to come home to." "I'll take care of it, Grandma," young Evelyn had promised. "I know you will, but you need to be smart about it." Margaret had taken her hand. "Men can be wonderful. They can also be foolish, and when money enters the picture, even good men make bad decisions." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Margaret had smiled sadly. "Your grandfather was a good man, but when he died, people came out of the woodwork. Distant relatives, business partners, so-called friends, all claiming they deserved a piece of what he'd built. I had to fight to keep this property, had to prove that it was mine, legally and irrevocably. That's why I created the trust, so you'd never have to fight those battles alone. The trust protects me, like a fortress." Margaret had squeezed her hand. "No matter who you marry, no matter what happens in your life, this estate will always be yours. The trust ensures that. When you turn 30, or if your marriage ends, ownership transfers to you completely. Until then, it's hidden, protected, safe. Why hidden? Because people can't take what they don't know you have." Evelyn hadn't understood then. She'd thought her grandmother was being paranoid, overly protective, unable to trust in modern love. Now, standing in the gardens of the estate Lucas had tried to claim, She understood perfectly. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind her. "I didn't think you'd come." Lucas's voice, cautious, uncertain. Evelyn didn't turn around. "Brielle invited me. That was—" He sighed. "She thought it would be generous to include you." Generous. Evelyn finally turned to face him. That's an interesting word choice. He looked older than she remembered. There were lines around his eyes, grey threading through his hair. Success had sharpened him, made him harder somehow. "You look good," he said awkwardly. "Pregnancy suits you. Thank you. When are you due?" "Next month." "A girl?" "Yes." He nodded, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Congratulations." They stood there in silence. Two people who'd once promised forever, now strangers. "Why did you come tonight, Evelyn?" Lucas finally asked. "I was invited. You know what I mean. You could have stayed away, made an excuse. Why subject yourself to this?" Evelyn looked at him steadily. "Did you ever actually love me?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "When we got married, when you moved into this house, when I told you I was pregnant. Did you love me? Or did you love what I represented?" "That's not fair." "I'm not trying to be fair. I'm trying to understand." She stepped closer. "Because I loved you, Lucas. Completely. I would have done anything for you, and you threw me away like I was nothing." His jaw clenched. "You were holding me back." "No. I wasn't ambitious enough for your image. There's a difference. You don't understand the pressure I was under." "I understood perfectly. I just didn't agree that success required abandoning your pregnant wife." Lucas looked away, toward the mansion blazing with light. "I'm happy now. Brielle understands my goals. She supports my vision." "Does she know?" "Know what?" Evelyn smiled slightly. "Nothing. Never mind." She started to walk past him, back toward the house. He caught her arm gently. "Evelyn, wait." He struggled for words. "I'm sorry. For how I handled things. You deserved better." She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. For a moment, she saw the man she'd married. Young, hopeful, full of dreams. Then she saw the man he'd become. Calculating, image-obsessed, willing to discard anyone who didn't serve his ambitions. "Yes," she said quietly, "I did deserve better." She pulled her arm free and walked back to the party. Behind her, Lucas stood alone in the gardens, a shadow of unease crossing his face. By 8:30 p.m. the party had reached its peak. The foyer was packed with guests, champagne flowing freely, laughter bouncing off marble walls. A jazz quartet played in the corner, something smooth and expensive that served as background noise for networking and gossip. Evelyn moved through the crowd carefully, her pregnant belly making navigation challenging. People gave her curious looks, but mostly avoided conversation. She was the ghost at the feast, acknowledged, but not welcomed. Near the grand staircase, she found Patricia Donovan again, talking with a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. "Evelyn," Patricia gestured her over. "This is my husband, Robert Donovan. Robert, This is Evelyn Carter. Robert's handshake was firm. Carter? You're Lucas's ex-wife, Evelyn finished. Yes. How diplomatic of them to invite you. That's one word for it. Robert chuckled. I like you already. Patricia said you were handling this evening with remarkable grace. I'm trying. I've known Lucas for about 3 years, Robert said, since he started working on the Preston development. He's talented, I'll give him that. Ambitious. But there's something about him that always struck me as... He searched for the right word. Hollow, Evelyn suggested. Exactly, Robert nodded. Like he's performing the role of successful businessman rather than actually being one. Robert, Patricia murmured, glancing around. I'm just being honest. The man talks a good game, but when you dig into his actual deals, most of the money comes from investors. He's leveraged to his eyeballs. This estate is probably the only real asset he has. Evelyn almost laughed, but caught herself. Is that what people think? That he owns the estate? Of course. He certainly implies it in every conversation. Robert sipped his scotch. Why? Doesn't he? Before Evelyn could answer, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Brielle had gathered everyone's attention and was calling for quiet. She stood at the base of the grand staircase, Lucas beside her, both of them holding champagne glasses. Everyone, can I have your attention, please? Brielle's voice rang out. The crowd settled, turning toward the couple. Thank you all so much for being here tonight, Brielle began, her smile dazzling. This estate, she gestured around grandly, has become so special to me. When Lucas first brought me here, I knew immediately that this was where we were meant to build our life together. Murmurs of approval rippled through the guests. We're planning the wedding for next spring, right here in the gardens, Brielle continued. Can you imagine? The roses will be in bloom. The weather will be perfect. It'll be the event of the season. More applause. Someone whistled. Lucas took over, his arm around Brielle's waist. This estate represents everything I've worked for. It's not just a house. It's a legacy, a symbol of what's possible when you refuse to settle for less than excellence. Evelyn's fingernails dug into her palms. Some of you remember when I first arrived in Dallas, Lucas continued. I had nothing but ambition and a dream. Now, standing here in this incredible home with this beautiful woman by my side, I can honestly say I've achieved everything I set out to accomplish. The crowd erupted in applause. Champagne glasses clinked. People called out congratulations. Brielle leaned into the microphone someone had produced. And we want to thank everyone who's been part of our journey. Your support has meant everything. Her eyes found Evelyn in the crowd, and her smile sharpened. Even those who doubted us, even those who said it wouldn't work. Look at us now. The air felt thick, heavy. Evelyn stood very still, her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter moving inside her. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was a small sound, almost lost in the noise of the party. But Evelyn heard it. She checked her phone. 8:44 p.m. Right on time. One of the valets answered the door. Through the crowd, Evelyn caught a glimpse of Harrison Mitchell stepping inside. Silver-haired, distinguished, carrying a leather briefcase. With him were 2 other people. A woman in professional attire holding a notary seal, and a younger man in a suit carrying document folders. Harrison's eyes found Evelyn across the room. He nodded once. She nodded back. Who's that? Someone near Evelyn murmured. Looks like lawyers. At a party? Lucas had seen them too. His expression shifted from confused to concerned. He whispered something to Brielle, who frowned. Harrison approached the staircase calmly, his briefcase in hand. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice cutting through the chatter. "I'm sorry to interrupt the celebration, but I have some important documents that require immediate attention." The room fell silent. Lucas descended the stairs, his smile forced. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" "Harrison Mitchell, attorney at law." Harrison extended his hand. "We've met before, Mr. Carter, during your divorce proceedings." Lucas's face went pale. "This isn't the time." "Actually," Harrison interrupted gently, "this is exactly the time. The transfer of ownership requires witnesses, and since you've helpfully gathered a large crowd, this seems quite appropriate." "Transfer of what?" Brielle demanded. Harrison looked at her with polite confusion. "The Hawthorne Estate, of course. What else would I be here to discuss?" The silence deepened. Evelyn stepped forward, moving through the crowd until she stood at the base of the staircase, facing Lucas and Brielle, with Harrison beside her. "What is he talking about?" Lucas said, his voice tight. Evelyn met his eyes. "You really never asked, did you? About the estate? About how we could live here without a mortgage? About why all the legal documents had my maiden name?" "Evelyn, the Hawthorne Estate has never belonged to you, Lucas." Her voice was calm, steady, carrying across the silent room. "It belonged to my grandmother, and as of 9 p.m. tonight," she checked her phone, "3 minutes from now, it belongs to me." Lucas stared at her like she'd started speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible," he said finally. "We lived here, together, as husband and wife. This is community property." "No." Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "It's not. The Hawthorne Estate has been held in a family trust since 1987. The trust terms explicitly exclude it from any marital assets. During your marriage, you were simply residing here." "I paid for renovations," Lucas protested. "With Mrs. Carter's permission, using funds from joint accounts she contributed to equally." Harrison flipped through documents, none of which establish ownership. In fact, every legal document related to this property, deed, tax records, insurance policies, lists Evelyn Margaret Hawthorne as the sole beneficiary. Brielle's face had gone from confused to angry. "This is ridiculous. Lucas, tell him he's wrong." But Lucas said nothing. He just stared at Evelyn, realization dawning in his eyes. "You knew," he whispered. "The whole time you knew." "Of course I knew," Evelyn said quietly. "It's my inheritance. My grandmother protected it specifically so that someone like you couldn't take it from me." "Someone like me?" "Someone who saw me as a stepping stone rather than a partner." The crowd was dead silent now, every guest transfixed by the unfolding drama. Harrison checked his watch. "It's 8:47 p.m. In approximately 2 minutes, the trust will automatically transfer full ownership to Mrs. Carter. As per Texas property law, all current occupants will need to vacate the premises unless given explicit permission to remain by the new owner." "Wait," Brielle said, her voice rising. "You're saying we have to leave tonight?" "That depends on Mrs. Carter's generosity." 60 pairs of eyes turned to Evelyn. She looked at Lucas, really looked at him. Remembered the man who'd told her she was too small for his future. The man who'd walked away while she was pregnant. The man who'd tried to humiliate her tonight by throwing a party in her house. "You have until midnight," she said, "to remove your personal belongings. Everything else stays." "Evelyn," Lucas started. The furniture you removed was my grandmother's. The paintings you sold were family heirlooms. The renovations you did without asking me were unauthorized modifications to my property. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. You're lucky I'm giving you time to pack. This is insane, Brielle shouted. You can't just kick us out. Actually, Harrison said, she can. The property is hers. You're trespassers. We're hosting a party. You were hosting a party at someone else's house without their permission. Lucas finally found his voice. I didn't know. I swear, Evelyn, I didn't know it was yours. You never told me. You never asked. She stepped closer to him. You assumed. You assumed everything I had was yours to use. You assumed you could trade me in for someone who fit your image better. You assumed wrong. Please, he said, and for a moment he looked genuinely desperate. Let me explain. Let me make this right. You had 3 years to make it right. You spent that time redecorating my house and planning a wedding with another woman. Evelyn turned to Harrison. What time is it? Harrison smiled. 8:49 p.m. Let's proceed. The notary stepped forward, along with the young man carrying documents. Harrison spread papers across a nearby table. Formal transfer documents, ownership certificates, legal attestations. I'll need your signature here, Mrs. Carter, Harrison said, offering a pen. Evelyn signed her name in clear, bold script. Evelyn Margaret Hawthorne. And here, she signed again. And finally, here. One more signature. Witnesses, please. Patricia Donovan stepped forward immediately. I'll witness. Robert joined her. So will I. They signed their names beside Evelyn's, their expressions serious. The notary applied her seal, stamping each document with official authority. Harrison gathered the papers, examining them carefully. Then he looked at his watch. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, as of 9:00 p.m. on October 14th, the Hawthorne Estate officially belongs to Evelyn Margaret Hawthorne. All previous informal arrangements are hereby terminated. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lucas's face crumpled. He sank down onto the stairs, head in his hands. Brielle stood frozen, her champagne glass forgotten, her diamond ring catching light but suddenly seeming hollow. I need you all to leave now, Evelyn said to the crowd. The party's over. The exodus began slowly, then accelerated. Guests who'd been laughing and drinking moments ago now scrambled for the exits, not wanting to be caught in the middle of whatever legal nightmare was unfolding. Some looked sympathetic toward Lucas. Others looked fascinated by the scandal. Most just wanted to escape before things got uglier. You can't do this, Brielle hissed, grabbing Evelyn's arm. We have rights. No, Evelyn said, pulling free. You have 3 hours to remove your personal items. After that, I'm changing the locks. I live here. You lived here, past tense. Lucas, do something. Brielle turned to him desperately, but Lucas just sat on the stairs staring at nothing. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. Harrison and his team began ushering guests toward the exits, polite but firm. Thank you for attending. Please watch your step. Thank you for your understanding. Within 10 minutes, the foyer was nearly empty. Only a handful of people remained. Patricia and Robert Donovan, looking concerned, a few confused waiters, Lucas and Brielle, and Evelyn, standing in the center of the marble floor, one hand on her pregnant belly. Patricia approached carefully. Are you okay? I'm fine. That was... Robert shook his head. That was the most dramatic property transfer I've witnessed in 40 years of business. It needed to be public, Evelyn said. If I'd done it quietly, he would have contested it, made it look like I was being vindictive. This way, 60 witnesses saw the legal documents, Saw the notary seal. There's no ambiguity. Brilliant, Patricia murmured. Absolutely brilliant. Can we help you with anything? Robert asked. No, but thank you for witnessing. It was an honor. Patricia squeezed her hand. You're much stronger than you look. They left, leaving only Lucas, Brielle, Harrison's team, and Evelyn. The silence was deafening. Finally, Lucas stood up. He looked at Evelyn with something between anger and grief. How long have you been planning this? Since I got your engagement invitation. No. He shook his head. Longer than that. The trust. The secrecy. You've been planning this since the beginning. I wasn't planning anything, Evelyn said wearily. My grandmother set up the trust decades ago to protect family assets. I honored that. I never told you because I didn't think I needed to. I thought we were building a life together. I thought the estate would eventually be ours, truly ours in every sense. Then why did you hide it? I didn't hide it, Lucas. You just never asked. You never cared about the details. You only cared about living in a mansion that impressed your clients. He flinched. You left me, Evelyn continued, her voice breaking slightly. You told me I wasn't good enough for your future. You walked away while I was pregnant with your child, and then you had the audacity to throw an engagement party here, in my house, to humiliate me. That wasn't— Yes, it was. She cut him off. Brielle's invitation made that clear. You wanted me to see what I'd lost. You wanted me broken. Well, here I am. 8 months pregnant, alone, standing in the house my grandmother left me, and you're the one who's lost everything. Lucas's eyes were red. I did love you, in my own way. That's the problem. Your way wasn't enough. Brielle had been silent throughout this exchange, but now she exploded. This is ridiculous. We're not leaving. You can't make us. Harrison stepped forward calmly. Mrs. Monroe, I strongly suggest you gather your belongings. If you're still on the property at midnight, Mrs. Hawthorne has the legal right to call the police and have you removed for trespassing. I'm not going anywhere. Then you'll be arrested. It's your choice. Lucas put a hand on her shoulder. Brielle, it's over. No. Fight this. Sue her. Do something. On what grounds? He laughed bitterly. She owns the estate. She always has. There's nothing to fight. But we were going to live here. We were going to get married here. Brielle's voice caught. For the first time, she looked less like a villain and more like a young woman watching her dreams evaporate. We need to go, Lucas said quietly. Where? I don't know. A hotel. We'll figure it out. He looked at Evelyn one last time. For what it's worth, I am sorry. I was selfish. I was cruel. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Yes, Evelyn said simply. I did. Lucas and Brielle climbed the stairs slowly, headed to pack their belongings. Their footsteps echoed through the empty house. Harrison came to stand beside Evelyn. How are you feeling? Tired. Relieved. A little sad. Sad? I did love him once. Watching this. She gestured to the empty foyer. It's not exactly triumphant. You did what you needed to do. You protected yourself and your daughter. I know. Evelyn looked down at her belly. She deserves a home. A real one. Not one built on lies. She'll have that now. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Evelyn heard a crash from upstairs, followed by raised voices. Lucas and Brielle were arguing. "Do I need to stay?" Harrison asked. "No, I'll be fine. They'll leave. Call me if there's any trouble." "I will. Thank you, Harrison, for everything." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "Your grandmother would be proud of you." After Harrison and his team left, Evelyn was alone in the foyer. She walked slowly through the rooms, turning off lights, looking at the changes Lucas had made. Some were tasteful, some were garish. All would be undone. This was her house now, fully, completely, irrevocably hers. She just needed to reclaim it. Lucas and Brielle left at 11:47 p.m. They'd packed their clothes, some electronics, personal items, everything else, the modern furniture Lucas had bought, the artwork he'd commissioned, the designer decor that screamed luxury, stayed behind. Evelyn watched from the foyer as they loaded suitcases into Lucas's Mercedes. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Brielle shot daggers at her, but said nothing. When the last bag was in the car, Lucas paused at the door. "The business meetings I have scheduled here next week, cancel them," Evelyn said. "Evelyn, this is not a negotiation, Lucas. You don't live here. You can't conduct business here. You need to find another venue." His jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea how much damage this will do to my reputation?" "About as much damage as you did to our marriage." He left without another word. Evelyn closed the door behind them, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against the wood. The silence of the empty house wrapped around her like a blanket. She was alone, truly, completely alone. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like freedom. The next morning, Evelyn woke in her old bedroom, the master suite her grandmother had decorated, which Lucas had claimed and remodeled. She spent the morning removing his traces. Modern art came down, replaced by family photos. Sleek furniture went into storage. Heavy drapes were replaced with sheer curtains that let in light. By noon, the room looked like hers again. She tackled the rest of the house over the following week, working carefully around her pregnancy. Patricia Donovan came by to help, bringing food and moral support. Robert hired a crew to haul away Lucas's furniture. "Where do you want this stuff to go?" one of the movers asked, gesturing to Lucas's designer sofa. "Donation center," Evelyn said. "All of it." News of the estate scandal spread through Dallas like wildfire. Social media exploded with speculation. Lucas's business partners started distancing themselves. The Preston development deal fell through when investors realized Lucas didn't actually own the asset he'd been using as collateral. Brielle disappeared from Dallas's social scene entirely. Some said she'd moved to LA. Others said she'd gone back to her hometown in Arizona. Either way, she was gone. Lucas tried calling Evelyn twice. She didn't answer. What was there left to say? A month later, Evelyn gave birth to her daughter. She named her Margaret, after her grandmother. Little Margaret was perfect. 7 pounds, healthy lungs, her mother's eyes. When the nurses handed her to Evelyn, wrapped in a pink blanket, Evelyn felt something click into place inside her chest. This was worth it. All of it. Patricia visited the hospital with flowers. "She's beautiful." "Thank you." "Have you heard from Lucas?" "No." "Good. You're better off." Evelyn looked down at her sleeping daughter. "I know." When Evelyn brought Margaret home to the Hawthorne Estate 2 days later, the house felt different. Warmer. The changes she'd made, restoring her grandmother's furniture, hanging family photos, letting light flood the rooms, had transformed it from Lucas's showpiece back into a home. Her home. She carried Margaret through the foyer, past the staircase where truth had shattered lies, into the nursery she'd prepared. The room was painted pale yellow, filled with books and toys, and everything a baby could need. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Evelyn whispered. Margaret yawned, tiny fists curling. Evelyn settled into the rocking chair by the window, looking out over the gardens where her grandmother's oak tree stood strong. She thought about the woman who'd built this estate, the woman who'd created the trust, the woman who'd known that love didn't always last, but family always mattered. "Thank you, Grandma," Evelyn murmured, "for protecting us." Outside, spring was beginning. The first buds were appearing on branches. The gardens would bloom soon. And inside, Evelyn rocked her daughter and planned their future, a future built on truth, not lies, on strength, not desperation, a future that belonged to them alone, whole. 6 months later, Evelyn stood in the gardens, watching Margaret reach for flowers. Her daughter was crawling now, exploring everything with fearless curiosity. They spent mornings in the gardens, afternoons in the library, evenings on the back porch watching the sun set over Dallas. Life had found a rhythm. Evelyn had restarted her consulting business, working from home while Margaret napped. Her grandmother's trust had included enough investments to keep them comfortable, but Evelyn wanted to work, wanted to build something of her own. Patricia and Robert had become dear friends, visiting weekly for dinner. They brought their grandchildren sometimes, filling the house with noise and laughter. The estate felt alive again. One evening, as Evelyn put Margaret to bed, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then curiosity won. "Hello? Evelyn, it's Lucas." She froze, one hand on Margaret's crib. "What do you want?" He paused. "I wanted to apologize. Properly. It's been 6 months. I know. It took me this long to understand what I'd done, what I'd thrown away." His voice sounded different, humbler. "I heard you had the baby. A girl?" "Yes. Congratulations. Thank you." Silence stretched between them. "I don't expect forgiveness," Lucas finally said. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I realize now how badly I treated you, how selfish I was. You were right about everything." Evelyn said nothing. "I lost the business," he continued. "Most of my clients dropped me when they found out the estate wasn't mine. I'm starting over, working for someone else. It's humbling." "I imagine it is." "Brielle left me, said I was a failure, said I'd embarrassed her." He laughed bitterly. "Karma, I guess. I'm sorry that happened. Are you?" "Yes. I don't wish you unhappiness, Lucas. I just wish you'd been better." "Me too." Another pause. Would you let me meet her? My daughter?" Evelyn looked down at Margaret, sleeping peacefully in her crib. "She's not yours." "Evelyn, you gave up that right when you walked away. When you told me I wasn't good enough. When you threw a party to humiliate me." Her voice was firm, but not cruel. "You wanted to erase me from your life. You succeeded. That includes Margaret. Please. Maybe someday," Evelyn said quietly. "When she's old enough to decide for herself, but not now, not like this." "I understand." He sounded defeated. "Take care of yourself, Evelyn." "You too, Lucas." She ended the call and turned off her phone. Margaret stirred in her sleep, making small noises. Evelyn reached down and stroked her daughter's soft hair. "It's just us, baby girl," she whispered. "And that's enough." The weeks turned into months. Margaret grew stronger, more vocal, more adventurous. Evelyn documented everything. First words, first steps, first laughter. She rebuilt her life deliberately, carefully, made new friends, took on challenging consulting projects, renovated the estate room by room, restoring its original character while adding modern touches that suited her taste. She dated occasionally but wasn't in a hurry. Her focus was Margaret and building a stable, happy home. Sometimes, late at night, Evelyn walked through the quiet house and remembered what it felt like to be 27 and broken, to stand barefoot on marble while her husband walked away, to believe she'd lost everything. But she hadn't lost everything. She'd lost a man who didn't value her. She'd lost a marriage built on misunderstanding. She'd lost the illusion that love alone was enough. What she'd gained was clarity, strength, a daughter, a home that truly belonged to her. And that was worth infinitely more. On Margaret's first birthday, Evelyn threw a party at the estate. Nothing like Lucas's engagement celebration. This was intimate, warm, filled with people who genuinely cared. Patricia and Robert came with their family, Evelyn's co-workers from her consulting business, neighbours from the surrounding properties who'd welcomed her back. They gathered in the gardens beneath the oak tree. Margaret toddled around, delighting in the attention, smashing cake into her face while everyone laughed. Patricia pulled Evelyn aside at one point. "How do you feel?" "Happy," Evelyn said, and meant it. "You've come so far." "We both have." Evelyn watched Margaret playing with another baby. "A year ago, I didn't know if I'd survive what was coming. Now look at us. Your grandmother would be so proud." "I hope so." Evelyn smiled. "I'm trying to honor what she built. This estate isn't just property. It's a promise. That family matters, that women can be strong, that we don't need anyone to save us. We can save ourselves." As the party wound down and the sun set behind the Dallas skyline, Evelyn stood on the back porch holding Margaret. Her daughter's head rested on her shoulder, heavy with sleep. The estate stretched out before them, gardens, pool, oak tree, everything her grandmother had protected, everything that was theirs now. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She had walked through fire and emerged whole, had faced humiliation and found strength, had lost a husband and gained herself. This was the life her grandmother had envisioned, the life the trust had been designed to protect, a life built on truth, on dignity, on the understanding that real power comes from knowing who you are and refusing to be diminished. "Welcome home," Evelyn whispered to her sleeping daughter. "Welcome to the life we're building together." And as stars appeared overhead and the house glowed warm behind them, Evelyn finally understood what her grandmother had meant all those years ago. The estate wasn't just property. It was a promise that they would always have a place to come home to. And that promise, unlike love or marriage or any other fragile human connection, would never be broken. The end.